You're on a crowded train, the kind where every inch of space feels like a luxury. The hum of the tracks beneath you, the distant chatter of fellow passengers, and the occasional clink of a coffee cup. You're settled into your seat, perhaps with a book in hand or lost in thought, when an elderly woman approaches. She looks at you, then at the seat, and asks if she can sit there. It's a simple request, yet it carries weight. You hesitate, considering the implications. Do you give up your seat? Or do you stand your ground? This scenario isn't just a hypothetical, it's a moment that many of us have faced or will face. It's a test of kindness, of empathy, and of personal boundaries. But what if I told you that a seemingly small act of generosity could lead to something far greater than you ever imagined? In today's story, we're diving into the life of a woman who found herself in this very situation. She was traveling on a train, just like any other day, when she was approached by an elderly passenger. The woman asked if she could sit in her seat, citing her age and the lack of available spaces. Without a second thought, our protagonist stood up and offered her seat. It was a gesture of kindness, of doing what felt right in the moment. But here's where the story takes a turn. That simple act of giving up her seat didn't go unnoticed. It set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. She didn't just gain a seat, she gained an opportunity, a connection, and a future that she hadn't anticipated. Now, you might be wondering, how could giving up a train seat lead to something so significant? What happened after that moment? And most importantly, what does this story mean for you? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand how a single act of kindness can ripple through time, creating opportunities and connections that transcend the moment. You'll see how one woman's decision to give up her seat led to a first-class experience that she never expected. So, if you're ready to discover how small acts can lead to extraordinary outcomes, keep watching. This isn't just a story about a train ride, it's a lesson in generosity, in seizing opportunities, and in the unexpected ways life can surprise us. But before we delve deeper, let me ask you, have you ever made a decision that seemed small at the time but changed your life in ways you couldn't have imagined? Think about it. Because the choices we make, no matter how insignificant they seem, can have profound impacts on our lives and the lives of others. Now, let's journey together and uncover the rest of this remarkable story. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. As the train rumbled along the tracks, the rhythmic clatter of wheels against steel seemed to echo the thoughts racing through Emily's mind. She had always been a creature of habit, finding comfort in the predictable patterns of her daily commute. The familiar faces, the same coffee shop stop, and the quiet solitude of her train ride provided a sense of normalcy in her otherwise chaotic life. But that morning, something felt different. There was an unease in the air, a subtle shift that she couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the way the sun barely peeked through the clouds, casting a dull grey hue over the city. Or maybe it was the strange feeling that she was being watched, a sensation that prickled the back of her neck and made her glance over her shoulder more than once. Emily had always been independent, relying on her own instincts and judgment. She had built a life for herself in the bustling city, carving out a space where she felt secure and in control. But lately, things had begun to unravel. Her work at the law firm had become increasingly demanding, with long hours and mounting pressure. Her relationships had suffered as a result, leaving her feeling isolated and disconnected. And now, this unsettling feeling on the train only added to her growing sense of unease. As she gazed out the window, lost in thought, a figure caught her eye. An elderly woman stood at the end of the car, her frail frame hunched beneath the weight of a heavy coat. She scanned the seats, her eyes scanning for an empty spot. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she realized that the only available seat was the one beside her. She quickly looked away, hoping the woman would find another seat. But when she glanced back, the woman was still standing there, her gaze fixed on Emily. A chill ran down Emily's spine as she met the woman's eyes. There was something unsettling about her stare, something that made Emily feel exposed and vulnerable. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, unsure of what to do. Should she offer her seat to the woman? Or should she pretend not to notice and hope she would move on? The decision weighed heavily on her, each option carrying its own set of consequences. The train continued its journey, the minutes stretching into what felt like hours. Emily's mind raced, turning over the possibilities and consequences of her actions. She had always prided herself on being kind and considerate, but this situation felt different. There was an intensity in the air, a sense that this moment held more significance than she could comprehend. As the train approached the next station, the woman took a step forward, her eyes never leaving Emily's. The doors opened, and passengers began to shuffle in and out. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that the moment had arrived. The woman was waiting for her to make a decision. In that instant, Emily understood that this was more than just a simple choice between offering her seat or not. It was a test, a challenge that would determine the course of her day and perhaps even her life. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, and she knew that whatever choice she made would have consequences she couldn't yet foresee. With a deep breath, Emily stood up, her legs trembling slightly beneath her. She stepped aside, allowing the woman to take the seat. As the woman settled in, she offered Emily a small, knowing smile. It was a smile that seemed to say, "You did the right thing." But as Emily returned to her own seat, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The atmosphere in the car felt different, charged with an energy she couldn't explain. She glanced around, but the other passengers seemed oblivious, lost in their own worlds. Yet, Emily couldn't shake the sense that she had just crossed a threshold, stepping into a new reality where nothing would ever be the same. As the train continued its journey, Emily's mind raced with questions. Who was the woman? Why had she chosen Emily? And what did this encounter mean for her future? The answers eluded her, slipping through her fingers like sand. But one thing was certain, her life was about to take a turn she never expected. The train slowed as it approached the next station, and Emily's gaze was drawn to the platform. Standing there, waiting, was a man in a dark suit. His eyes scanned the crowd, his expression unreadable. As the train came to a stop, he stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Emily's. She felt a jolt of recognition, though she couldn't place where she had seen him before. The doors opened, and the man boarded the train, his eyes never leaving Emily's. He moved through the car with purpose, his presence commanding attention. As he approached, he stopped beside her seat, his gaze lingering for a moment before he spoke. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice low and steady. "I've been looking for you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. How did he know her name? And why was he looking for her? The questions swirled in her mind, but before she could respond, he continued. "I have an offer for you," he said, his tone businesslike. "An opportunity that could change your life." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Emily's heart raced as she tried to process what was happening. Who was this man? And what kind of offer was he talking about? Before she could ask any of the questions flooding her mind, the man handed her a sleek, black envelope. "Consider it," he said simply, before turning and walking away. Emily sat frozen in her seat, the envelope resting in her hands. She stared at it, unsure of what to do. Should she open it? Should she ignore it? The decision weighed heavily on her, each option carrying its own set of risks and rewards. As the train continued its journey, Emily's thoughts raced. What was this offer? And what did it mean for her future? The answers remained elusive, but one thing was certain, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The train slowed as it approached the next station, and Emily's gaze was drawn once again to the platform. This time, there was no man waiting. No mysterious figure to board the train. Just the usual crowd of commuters, going about their daily routines. But as the doors opened and passengers began to disembark, Emily noticed something strange. The woman who had sat beside her earlier was among the crowd, her eyes scanning the faces of the departing passengers. When she spotted Emily, she gave a small nod, as if acknowledging some unspoken understanding. Emily's heart skipped a beat. What was going on? Who were these people? And what did they want with her? The questions swirled in her mind, but no answers came. She was left with more questions than ever before, each one leading to more uncertainty and confusion. As the train pulled away from the station, Emily sat back in her seat, the envelope still clutched in her hands. She stared at it, her mind racing with possibilities. What was inside? What did it mean? And most importantly, what did it all have to do with her? The answers remained just out of reach, Tantalizingly close yet frustratingly, Emily sat motionless, her fingers brushing over the envelope's edge as the train thundered through yet another tunnel, the flickering lights above casting intermittent shadows across her face. She hadn't opened it yet. Something about it felt too calculated, too curated. The stranger knew her name, his timing was exact, and now this, the envelope, black and cold like a secret it wasn't ready to give up. She turned it over once more, looking for a seal, a name, anything. But it was blank. Just her fingerprints smudged across its slick surface, proof that whatever this was, it had found her. Just as her thoughts spiraled deeper, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. One notification. It wasn't a message or a call. It was a forwarded email from her younger brother, Jake, subject line, "Did you get one too?" She stared at it for a few seconds before tapping it open. The email was short, uncharacteristically tense. Some guy approached me at the station today. Gave me this letter. He knew my name, where I worked, even that I was going to see you this weekend. It's freaking me out. The envelope was black. Let me know if this is some kind of weird prank. Attached was a photo, an envelope, identical to the one in Emily's hand. The breath caught in her throat. So it wasn't just her. This wasn't random. It was planned, orchestrated, and now Jake, who lived an entirely different life on the other side of the city, far removed from her daily grind, was being drawn into whatever this was. She tried to replay every moment from the last few weeks, every decision that could have triggered something. Had she been involved in something unknowingly? Was this tied to the client she took on at the law firm, the one with a sealed background and confidential files that even she wasn't allowed to open without a federal clearance? Could it be connected to that strange call she got 2 nights ago, just static on the other end, but she'd felt the presence of someone listening in, lingering, waiting? She texted Jake immediately, fingers trembling. "Yes. I got the same envelope. I'm on the train. I don't know what's going on, but don't open it yet." She hesitated before hitting send, then added, "We may be in danger." Her message sent, she turned back to the window, but the familiar comfort of the passing landscape offered no relief. The tension was mounting, no longer confined to her own paranoia. Someone was pulling strings, not just hers, but now Jake's too, and if he was being watched, then so was she. The train screeched slightly as it shifted tracks, causing the passengers to sway. Emily's eyes wandered the cabin again. That same elderly woman was gone. Had she gotten off at the last station? Or was she watching from somewhere else? And what about the man in the suit? How did he know her name? And what was the offer he was talking about? Was it a reward? A threat disguised as opportunity? Why use envelopes? Why choose public transportation? And why now? Before she could piece anything together, her phone buzzed again. A new message. This time from a blocked number. No name, no icon. Just text, "He's not who you think he is. Don't trust anyone. Especially not family." Emily felt her blood go cold. Her first instinct was disbelief. Someone was trying to divide her and Jake, classic manipulation. But the seed of doubt was planted. Who would know the right things to say to turn her against her own brother? And more importantly, how did they have access to both of them so intimately? Suddenly, everything felt unstable. The black envelope wasn't just a symbol, it was bait, a carefully crafted invitation into a game she hadn't agreed to play. But now she was in it, whether she wanted to be or not. Every element of her life began to feel suspect. The coworker who had been unusually friendly lately, the neighbor whose dog barked at night but only when Emily came home, the barista at her coffee shop who always seemed to know her order before she said a word. The world was tilting sideways, and the more she thought about it, the more connections unraveled into questions without answers. Was Jake the next target, or was he part of the setup? Could it be possible he was involved from the beginning? A part of her recoiled at the thought. They'd grown up together, protected each other through the worst of their parents' divorce, lived in the same tiny apartment for a year after college when neither of them could afford rent. But time changes people. Secrets rot in silence. What if he had something to gain? Or worse, something to hide? She turned the envelope over one more time, looking for courage. Maybe the truth was inside. Maybe it would give her clarity. But then again, Maybe opening it would mean accepting that this story was already out of her control. And just as she steadied her resolve, the train jolted to a sudden stop in the middle of a dark tunnel. Lights flickered again, and an overhead announcement crackled on, but this time, it wasn't the train conductor's voice. It was distorted, low, unfamiliar. "Miss Thompson, you have 5 stops to decide." And then silence. No one around her reacted. Not a single person flinched. It was as if only she had heard it. Her ears rang with the echo of it, the words slithering into her mind like a virus, infecting every remaining sense of logic. This wasn't coincidence. This was something far more deliberate, and now the countdown had started. Somewhere deep down, she understood, this was a puzzle. And every piece, Jake, the man in the suit, the envelope, the woman on the train, was part of a larger image she hadn't yet seen. But the longer she waited, the harder it would be to know who to trust. Time was against her, and the only certainty she had left was that the next move had to be hers. And as she gripped the envelope tighter, her phone vibrated once more. This time, it was a video. Sent from Jake's number. But Jake wasn't in it. Emily stared at the video thumbnail, a frozen frame of what appeared to be a dimly lit hallway. The timestamp in the corner was today's date, just 10 minutes ago. Her thumb hovered over the screen as her heartbeat thumped in her ears. She was afraid to press play, but more afraid of what not knowing might mean. Her breath caught in her throat as she finally tapped the screen. The video crackled to life, shaky and grainy, as if filmed by a hidden camera or a phone held too close to the chest. The image swayed as the person filming crept forward. Emily could make out an apartment number, 3B. Jake's. Her stomach twisted. The hallway was silent, the flickering overhead bulb casting a sickly yellow hue over the scratched metal door. Then, out of nowhere, a loud bang echoed through the audio, a door slamming shut somewhere off camera. The video jolted and ended abruptly. No context. No faces. No words. Just that timestamp and that familiar hallway, empty but menacing. Panic swept through Emily like a tidal wave, wiping away every rational thought. She tried calling Jake immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. Her trembling fingers dialed again. Nothing. She texted him frantically, "Are you okay? Where are you? Please respond now." Still nothing. Her mind raced. What if he'd been taken? What if this wasn't just some twisted game but something far more dangerous? That message from the blocked number came rushing back, "Don't trust family." What had they meant by that? Was it a warning to protect him, or a warning about him? The train had started moving again, but Emily barely noticed. Her surroundings were now just a blur of motion and noise. Everyone around her seemed oblivious to what she was going through. Faces buried in phones, headphones in ears, eyes glazed from early commutes. She felt like she was drowning in a sea of strangers who couldn't see that the world around her had suddenly cracked open. The black envelope still rested in her lap, but it felt heavier now, as though it had absorbed the weight of her fear. She wanted to throw it away, to rid herself of its looming presence, but she knew she couldn't. It wasn't just an envelope anymore, it was evidence, a clue, maybe even a key to whatever hell she and Jake had just been dragged into. Her mind flickered back to the last time she spoke to him, 2 days ago, over lunch, nothing unusual. He'd seemed distracted, sure, but she'd chalked that up to work stress or maybe that new girl he was seeing. Now every detail from that conversation took on a sinister edge. Had he known something was coming? Was he trying to warn her? Or had he been lured into this the same way she had, calm at first, subtle, like a spider weaving a web too intricate to see until it was too late to escape? The train pulled into another station, the screech of brakes pulling her from her thoughts. The doors hissed open, and passengers shuffled out. That's when she saw him again, the man in the dark suit. This time, he wasn't looking at her. He was speaking to someone at the far end of the platform, handing them something, then gesturing toward her train car. Her stomach turned as she ducked behind the seat. Whoever he was talking to, their posture shifted, and they began walking toward her door. It wasn't random. It wasn't casual. They were coming for her. Emily didn't wait to see who they were. As the doors started to close, she leapt up and dashed out, her boots hitting the concrete platform with a jarring slap. She kept her head down and moved quickly into the crowd, heart pounding in her chest, adrenaline flooding her veins. She glanced back only once. The suited man was still watching, not chasing, just watching, as if he knew exactly where she was going and didn't need to rush. That terrified her more than if he had run after her. He wasn't worried about losing her. He was in control. She pushed through the station and out onto the street, the cold air hitting her like a wall. Traffic roared, sirens wailed in the distance, but it all felt muted. Her thoughts were spiraling, and every sound around her felt like a threat. She ducked into a nearby convenience store, pressing herself into the narrow aisle between canned soups and cereal boxes, trying to breathe. She needed to regroup, to think clearly, to figure out her next move. Her phone buzzed again, and her chest tightened. Another blocked number. This time, it was a photo. It was a shot of her own apartment door. Apartment 17F. The doormat, the chipped paint on the handle, even the little welcome sign she'd bought on a whim from Etsy, all unmistakable. The message that followed chilled her to the bone. "We're inside." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She wasn't going to fall apart in the cereal aisle. Not now. Not when someone had just threatened to break into the one place in the world that had felt safe. Her sanctuary had been violated, and now there was nowhere to run. She needed help, but who could she trust? The police. Would they even believe her? She had no proof, just a string of strange encounters, vague threats, and a sense of dread that was growing louder by the minute. Everything she knew, her home, her brother, her reality, was unraveling. And somewhere, someone was watching every move she made. The deeper she went, the more she realized this wasn't about a random seat on a train. It was about her. She wasn't a player in this game. She was the prize. And now, someone had just declared that the game had officially begun. Emily sat hunched on a low plastic stool in the back of the convenience store, tucked between a humming soda fridge and a stack of cardboard boxes that smelled faintly of bleach and stale sugar. Her phone was clutched in her hand like a lifeline, and her breath came in shallow bursts, her heart pounding loud enough she could feel it in her ears. The photo of her apartment door glared back at her from the screen, a silent promise that her life was no longer hers. She had to move. She had to find Jake. She had to understand what the hell was going on. But then, just as she opened her messages again, another text popped up from someone she hadn't heard from in years. "You're not safe. He lied to you. Meet me at the address below. Don't tell Jake." The name on the sender shocked her. Alicia Turnan. Her college roommate. The one who had vanished after graduation without a trace. They'd been close, best friends, really, until one day Alicia packed up and left without saying goodbye. No note, no calls, nothing. Emily had spent months wondering what happened to her. They'd even filed a missing person report, but nothing came of it. Over time, Alicia became just another question mark in Emily's long list of things that didn't make sense. And now, she was suddenly back, warning her not to trust the only family she had left. The address she'd sent was across town, near an abandoned theater that had been shut down since the early 2000s. The place had become one of those local urban legends, the kind you see in YouTube documentaries about creepy unsolved mysteries and secret government surveillance. It didn't make any sense until Emily remembered something. One drunken night in college, Alicia had once whispered that she knew things, real things, she said, about patterns, surveillance, how certain people just vanish when they ask the wrong questions. Emily had laughed it off at the time, chalking it up to Alicia's flair for drama and too many shots of tequila. But now, those words felt like a breadcrumb she hadn't realized was being dropped until it was too late. Emily made her way across the city by foot, avoiding cabs and transit, keeping her hood up and her phone tucked away. Every time she looked over her shoulder, it felt like someone had just ducked out of view. By the time she arrived at the theater, the sun had dipped low behind the skyline, casting everything in shadow. The building loomed ahead, its windows shattered, the marquee still clinging to a few faded letters that once spelled out a forgotten film. She ducked through a side alley and found the door exactly where Alicia said it would be, half covered in ivy, rusted but unlocked. Inside, the smell of dust and mildew wrapped around her like a shroud. Every step echoed. The only light came from a row of emergency lamps strung through the main hallway, buzzing weakly, as if someone had set this place up for something more than just a secret meeting. And then, Alicia appeared. Her hair was shorter now, dyed darker, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. But it was her. Same piercing stare, same quick way of scanning the room. She didn't hug Emily. She didn't offer apologies. She simply said, "You should have listened to the silence." Emily didn't understand. Alicia motioned for her to sit, and then everything Emily thought she knew began to unravel. According to Alicia, none of this was about a random train seat. That was a symbol, a test set up by a network of anonymous operatives who tracked behavioral patterns of everyday people. The envelope wasn't meant for just anyone, it was meant for people like Emily, who'd unknowingly shown up on their radar years ago due to a data leak connected to a government contractor. Alicia said she'd found out about the program during her last year of college, stumbled into a restricted server while working as an intern. That's why she disappeared. Not by choice, but because they found out she knew. But then came the twist that broke Emily's world apart. Jake had known the whole time. He had been in contact with them for months. His job, his apartment, even his relationship with Emily, it had all been closely monitored. The black envelope wasn't his first. He'd received 2 others before that. Alicia pulled out her phone and showed Emily a video surveillance footage. It was grainy, shot from what looked like a hidden camera placed across from Jake's apartment. In the footage, he could be seen talking to the man in the suit. Calmly. Shaking hands. Accepting something. Then, moments later, stuffing a black envelope into his jacket pocket before entering his building. Emily's throat closed. The footage was dated over a week ago. That was before her encounter on the train. Before Jake's frantic email. Before the photo of her apartment door. Which meant, he wasn't warning her. He was setting her up. Suddenly, everything made sense in the worst possible way. Jake hadn't vanished. He hadn't been kidnapped. He'd gone dark on purpose. And if the photo of her apartment was real, then it meant someone had access. Someone Jake had let in. Maybe they'd been in there already. Maybe they'd been watching her sleep, listening to her calls, reading her thoughts through the devices she lived her life around. The paranoia she'd been feeling, it wasn't in her head. It was real. Every quiet moment had been orchestrated. Every step she took had been mapped. Every choice predicted. Alicia leaned closer and whispered, "They don't just watch. They push. They manipulate. They test what we'll do under pressure. But once you see the truth, they stop playing games. They come for you." Emily's thoughts fractured under the weight of it. The message saying don't trust family wasn't an exaggeration, it was a warning. Jake wasn't a victim. He was a handler. Or worse, a recruiter. But why? Why her? What made her so valuable? And what would they do now that she knew? Just then, Alicia's phone lit up again. Another message. One line. No name. She knows. Move her now. That's when the lights cut out. And everything went black. The pitch-black silence of the theater was suffocating, stretching across the room like a shroud that pressed against Emily's skin. Somewhere in the darkness, Alicia was breathing hard, trying not to make a sound. Emily could hear her own heartbeat hammering in her chest, feel her pulse in her throat. The message on Alicia's phone had left no room for doubt, they were out of time. Whoever was tracking them knew they were together, and worse, knew what Emily now understood. She reached out blindly, trying to find Alicia's arm, but a sudden crashing noise from somewhere near the back of the building jolted them both. It wasn't subtle. It was intentional. A warning shot before the real storm. They didn't speak. Alicia grabbed her hand and pulled her through the dark toward a maintenance stairwell she claimed led to the roof. The door creaked as they shoved it open, revealing a narrow stairwell lined with exposed pipes and mildew-stained concrete. Each step was a deafening echo, and Emily's mind spun with 100 thoughts about Jake, about the envelope, about what she'd just learned. But the worst of it was the creeping sense that the person she loved most in the world might have played her like a piece on a board she never even knew existed. By the time they reached the roof, the wind had picked up, sharp and bitter. Below them, the city looked normal, horns honking, lights blinking, people going about their night. But from up here, nothing felt real. Emily could barely focus as Alicia crouched near a vent to check her phone. Another message blinked into view, this one for Emily. From Jake. I did it to protect you. Meet me alone. No phones. You have 1 hour. Don't bring her. Emily's breath caught in her lungs. For a moment, she just stared at the screen, the words burned into her vision. He knew. He knew about Alicia, about where she was, what she'd learned. She had to move. She had to find Jake. She had to understand what the hell was going on. But then, just as she opened her messages again, another text popped up from someone she hadn't heard from in years. You're not safe. He lied to you. Meet me at the address below. Don't tell Jake. The name on the sender shocked her. Alicia Turnan. Her college roommate. The one who had vanished after graduation without a trace. They'd been close, best friends, really, until one day Alicia packed up and left without saying goodbye. No note, no calls, nothing. Emily had spent months wondering what happened to her. They'd even filed a missing person report, but nothing came of it. Over time, Alicia became just another question mark in Emily's long list of things that didn't make sense. And now, she was suddenly back, warning her not to trust the only family she had left. The address she'd sent was across town, near an abandoned theater that had been shut down since the early 2000s. The place had become one of those local urban legends, the kind you see in YouTube documentaries about creepy unsolved mysteries and secret government surveillance. It didn't make any sense until Emily remembered something. One drunken night in college, Alicia had once whispered that she knew things, real things, she said, about patterns, surveillance, how certain people just vanish when they ask the wrong questions. Emily had laughed it off at the time, chalking it up to Alicia's flair for drama and too many shots of tequila. But now, those words felt like a breadcrumb she hadn't realized was being dropped until it was too late. Emily made her way across the city by foot, avoiding cabs and transit, keeping her hood up and her phone tucked away. Every time she looked over her shoulder, it felt like someone had just ducked out of view. By the time she arrived at the theater, the sun had dipped low behind the skyline, casting everything in shadow. The building loomed ahead, its windows shattered, the marquee still clinging to a few faded letters that once spelled out a forgotten film. She ducked through a side alley and found the door exactly where Alicia said it would be, half covered in ivy, rusted but unlocked. Inside, the smell of dust and mildew wrapped around her like a shroud. Every step echoed. The only light came from a row of emergency lamps strung through the main hallway, buzzing weakly, as if someone had set this place up for something more than just a secret meeting. And then, Alicia appeared. Her hair was shorter now, dyed darker, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. But it was her. Same piercing stare, same quick way of scanning the room. She didn't hug Emily. She didn't offer apologies. She simply said, "You should have listened to the silence." Emily didn't understand. Alicia motioned for her to sit, and then everything Emily thought she knew began to unravel. According to Alicia, none of this was about a random train seat. That was a symbol, a test, set up by a network of anonymous operatives who tracked behavioral patterns of everyday people. The envelope wasn't meant for just anyone, it was meant for people like Emily, who'd unknowingly shown up on their radar years ago due to a data leak connected to a government contractor. Alicia said she'd found out about the program during her last year of college, stumbled into a restricted server while working as an intern. That's why she disappeared. Not by choice, but because they found out she knew. But then came the twist that broke Emily's world apart. Jake had known the whole time. He had been in contact with them for months. His job, his apartment, even his relationship with Emily, it had all been closely monitored. The black envelope wasn't his first. He'd received 2 others before that. Alicia pulled out her phone and showed Emily a video, surveillance footage. It was grainy, shot from what looked like a hidden camera placed across from Jake's apartment. In the footage, he could be seen talking to the man in the suit. Calmly. Shaking hands. Accepting something. Then, moments later, stuffing a black envelope into his jacket pocket before entering his building. Emily's throat closed. The footage was dated over a week ago. That was before her encounter on the train. Before Jake's frantic email. Before the photo of her apartment door. Which meant, he wasn't warning her. He was setting her up. Suddenly, everything made sense in the worst possible way. Jake hadn't vanished. He hadn't been kidnapped. He'd gone dark on purpose. And if the photo of her apartment was real, then it meant someone had access. Someone Jake had let in. Maybe they'd been in there already. Maybe they'd been watching her sleep, listening to her calls, reading her thoughts through the devices she lived her life around. The paranoia she'd been feeling, it wasn't in her head. It was real. Every quiet moment had been orchestrated. Every step she took had been mapped. Every choice predicted. Alicia leaned closer and whispered, "They don't just watch. They push. They manipulate. They test what we'll do under pressure. But once you see the truth, they stop playing games. They come for you." Emily's thoughts fractured under the weight of it. The message saying don't trust family wasn't an exaggeration, it was a warning. Jake wasn't a victim. He was a handler. Or worse, a recruiter. But why? Why her? What made her so valuable? And what would they do now that she knew? Just then, Alicia's phone lit up again. Another message. One line. No name. She knows. Move her now. That's when the lights cut out. And everything went black. The pitch-black silence of the theater was suffocating, stretching across the room like a shroud that pressed against Emily's skin. Somewhere in the darkness, Alicia was breathing hard, trying not to make a sound. Emily could hear her own heartbeat hammering in her chest, feel her pulse in her throat. The message on Alicia's phone had left no room for doubt, they were out of time. Whoever was tracking them knew they were together, and worse, knew what Emily now understood. She reached out blindly, trying to find Alicia's arm, but a sudden crashing noise from somewhere near the back of the building jolted them both. It wasn't subtle. It was intentional. A warning shot before the real storm. They didn't speak. Alicia grabbed her hand and pulled her through the dark toward a maintenance stairwell she claimed led to the roof. The door creaked as they shoved it open, revealing a narrow stairwell lined with exposed pipes and mildew-stained concrete. Each step was a deafening echo, and Emily's mind spun with 100 thoughts about Jake, about the envelope, about what she'd just learned. But the worst of it was the creeping sense that the person she loved most in the world might have played her like a piece on a board she never even knew existed. By the time they reached the roof, the wind had picked up, sharp and bitter. Below them, the city looked normal, horns honking, lights blinking, people going about their night. But from up here, nothing felt real. Emily could barely focus as Alicia crouched near a vent to check her phone. Another message blinked into view, this one for Emily. From Jake. "I did it to protect you. Meet me alone. No phones. You have 1 hour. Don't bring her." Emily's breath caught in her lungs. For a moment, she just stared at the screen, the words burned into her vision. He knew. He knew about Alicia, about where she was, what she'd learned. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was inviting her back into his lie and forcing her to make a choice. She turned to Alicia, unsure of what to say. Alicia's eyes met hers, hard and searching. "You can't go," Alicia said quietly. "You know what he is now." But Emily's heart twisted painfully. She remembered growing up with Jake, sharing a bunk bed in that tiny Chicago apartment, sneaking out of the house at night to go look at stars from the roof of their building, covering for each other in every mess they got into. He wasn't just her brother. He was the only family she had left. And even now, part of her wanted to believe there was a version of the truth that made him innocent, or at least forgivable. She wanted to believe that maybe he was caught in something bigger, maybe he'd been threatened, coerced, cornered. But if that were true, why hadn't he told her? Why play both sides? Why deliver her into whatever system had orchestrated this entire nightmare? The choices in front of her were stark. She could go to Jake, alone, and risk walking into a trap designed to silence her now that she knew too much. Or she could run with Alicia, disappearing into the underground life her old friend had been surviving in for years, always hiding, always paranoid, always watching her back. Neither option promised safety. Neither gave her answers. One risked betrayal. The other guaranteed isolation. Alicia pressed her phone into Emily's hand. "I've got a burner car. We can be across the border by morning. New IDs, no digital footprint, no trace. But once we go, that's it. You never get to come back. You never get to find out what really happened. The wind howled around them, and Emily felt tears sting her eyes, not just from fear, but from the sheer weight of the decision. Jake was her blood. Alicia was the only person who'd tried to pull her out of the fog. Every instinct inside her screamed that something was deeply wrong with all of this, but for the first time, she didn't know who to trust, not even herself. Maybe that was the point. Maybe that was the real game, to dismantle her certainty piece by piece until she was too broken to fight. Still clutching the phone, Emily stepped away from Alicia and looked out over the city. The lights below blinked like signals, and the sounds of the night moved around her in a blur of movement and noise. Somewhere out there, Jake was waiting, and whatever came next depended on what she decided in the next few minutes. Her past and future hung in the balance, suspended between the familiar and the unknown, between a brother who might be her greatest betrayal and a friend who might be her only hope. But before she could speak, another message popped up on Alicia's phone, this time, a photo. It showed a man slumped in a chair, hands zip-tied, blood streaked down his face. Emily gasped. It was her co-worker, Lucas, the only person at the law firm who had ever helped her decode one of the encrypted case files linked to the contractor she'd suspected started all of this. He'd gone radio silent 2 days ago. She assumed he was avoiding her, burned out from the risks. But now it was clear. He was being held. Maybe tortured. Maybe used as leverage. Then the final text arrived. No name. No signature. Choose him. Or Jake. One dies. One walks. Emily dropped the phone. Now, there were no right choices. Only impossible ones. Emily stood frozen, the rooftop wind slapping at her face, the glow of the city below now a cold reminder of just how exposed she was. Her mind reeled as she stared at the image on Alicia's phone, the blooded, bound figure of Lucas, someone who had only ever tried to help her make sense of the confidential data she never should have had access to. He was the one person at the firm who never treated her like she was paranoid. She remembered the way he'd once whispered, "You're not crazy, Emily. There's something buried in these files that isn't supposed to be here." Now he was the collateral in a game she barely understood, and the choice was unbearable: save him or Jake. One would die, the other would walk free. That was the message. That was the ultimatum. Alicia was pacing, rubbing her temples, muttering to herself about signals being intercepted and protocols breached, but Emily was no longer hearing her. Everything she thought she knew about her life, the law firm, her brother, even Alicia, was slipping out of focus. This wasn't just about her anymore. Someone had orchestrated all of it, and whoever they were, they had resources, reach, and no hesitation about crossing lines. And the terrifying part was, Emily had a sinking feeling this entire experience, the black envelope, the stranger on the train, the staged messages, hadn't been a desperate act of intimidation. It had been a controlled experiment. Alicia suddenly stopped pacing. She pulled up another app on her phone, entered a sequence of codes, and a map popped up, glowing red with small pulsing dots across the city. "You need to see this," she said, her voice shaking now, not from fear, but from the weight of truth. "They're not just watching us. They're watching thousands. Everyone who's ever triggered their filters, financial anomalies, behavioral outliers, whistleblowers, political dissidents, people who got too close to a truth they weren't supposed to see. This isn't about you and Jake. You were just the perfect test subject." Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. Each red dot represented a person, someone being tracked, manipulated, maybe even experimented on. The scale was beyond anything she could have imagined. It wasn't about justice, or law, or even power in the traditional sense. It was about control. Surveillance woven so deeply into society that even those caught in its web didn't know they were being played. Her own work at the law firm, she realized, had been feeding into it. All those contracts and NDA-bound clients with strange aliases and sealed records, they weren't isolated cases. They were connected. And somehow, Jake was involved in facilitating the handoffs, identifying who to tag and follow, using her as a vessel to extract deeper data under the guise of sibling protection. But the most crushing blow came next. Alicia, sensing the shift in Emily's gaze, backed away slightly, but not fast enough. Emily had seen the notification flash across her screen just moments before, a message received not minutes ago, but hours. The one that had told her she knows. Move her now. Alicia had seen that message long before she warned Emily. Which meant she hadn't stumbled onto it in real time. She'd known. She'd waited. Possibly even coordinated. Emily's stomach dropped as the realization hit her. How long have you been working with them? Alicia's face twitched, and for a split second, something shifted in her eyes, regret, maybe, or resignation. I wasn't supposed to contact you, she said quietly. I was supposed to monitor you. Make sure you reached the end point. That's how I bought my freedom. They promised if I cooperated, they'd erase my profile, let me start over. I didn't know they were going to go after Lucas. I swear. The words felt like ice down Emily's spine. Every minute of the last 24 hours had been filled with manipulation, from the message on the train to the rooftop confession. She was surrounded by people who knew more than they said, who offered help only to steer her toward a predetermined outcome. Her entire life had been feeding data into this machine, and now that she'd stumbled into awareness, the people behind it were closing the circle. The truth wasn't just being hidden, it was being weaponized. The phone in Emily's hand buzzed again. This time, a live feed popped up. She tapped it without thinking, her breath catching as a video started to stream. It showed a warehouse, dimly lit, the camera positioned high and wide. In the center, 2 chairs. In one, Lucas, barely conscious. In the other, Jake. Alive. Unharmed. Sitting straight, almost relaxed. Except his expression wasn't one of fear. It was blank. Calm. Like someone waiting for a meeting to start. Then a voice echoed through the feed, disembodied, distorted. The final phase has begun. Emily, you've proven more capable than expected. We underestimated your instincts. Now choose. Confirm your value. Decide which one of them walks out of here. The other becomes part of the archive. Archive. The word chilled her to the bone. That wasn't death. That was something worse, erasure. Identity stripped, freedom revoked, rewritten into something unrecognizable. Emily had seen snippets of what happened to people who were archived. Psychological conditioning. Behavioral reprogramming. Lives wiped clean and rewritten in the service of maintaining the balance. Conspiracies had faces now. They wore suits, worked behind legal walls, and moved in the shadows of policy and loophole. It wasn't about hiding in plain sight. It was about owning the system so deeply that exposure no longer mattered. She looked at Jake's face on the screen, searching for some sign of humanity, some hint that her brother was still in there. But he didn't speak. He didn't flinch. He just looked straight into the camera. Straight at her. And smiled. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears as the live feed flickered, showing Lucas slumped over, barely moving, while Jake sat upright and still, his posture impossibly calm given the situation. It wasn't just unsettling, it was inhuman. The feed wasn't just a threat. It was a final test. A performance. A challenge designed for her and only her, a psychological trap she could feel tightening around her with every second she hesitated. Across from her, Alicia stood frozen, caught somewhere between guilt and duty, her earlier confession still echoing in Emily's mind. She had been played from every angle. Her life hadn't just been manipulated, it had been curated, orchestrated like a staged production, and now the curtain was rising on the final act. The voice from the feed returned, warped and inhuman, but terrifyingly articulate. What we're offering is evolution, Emily. Choice is the last illusion. Your compliance is already factored in. We've run this scenario 100 times. We just needed to know how far you'd go. Emily stepped back from the edge of the rooftop, clutching her phone like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. What are you talking about? She demanded into the open air, her voice trembling but rising. What is this? Who are you? The feed blurred, and then the video began to split, 2 windows now, side by side. One showed Lucas. The other showed Emily herself. A hidden angle from her apartment bedroom. Dated footage. Weeks ago. She was brushing her hair, pacing the room, speaking aloud to no one, rehearsing a deposition, something trivial. But the camera had been there. Watching. Waiting. Recording even the most mundane moments. Alicia stepped forward, eyes wide, and without speaking, pointed to the timestamp. That's when Emily noticed it. The date. It was before the train. Before the envelope. Before Jake ever reached out. The realization hit her like a punch to the chest. This hadn't started when she got on that train. It had started long before. She hadn't been chosen because she sat in the right place at the right time. She'd been cultivated. Studied. Nudged. Every choice, every coincidence, every step that led her here had been guided. She wasn't being tested. She was being engineered. Alicia was shaking her head now, her voice trembling. They call it Project Mirror. They're creating artificial versions of decision-makers, people in politics, media, law, and feeding them live behavioral models. You're one of them, Emily. You're not just a case study. You're the template. Emily felt the world tilt. Her knees buckled slightly as the words sank in. That's why Jake had stayed close. Why the firm kept her on confidential cases with barely any oversight. Why people like Lucas were brought in not to help, but to confirm data. She was the center of a simulation she never knew existed, a behavioral clone being built in real time from every scrap of her life. And now, someone behind the scenes was waiting for her to choose, because that decision would finalize the framework. Her logic, her empathy, her ethics coded into a system designed to deploy replicas of her for operations she could never comprehend. Suddenly, a sound cracked across the rooftop, a metallic clank from the stairwell door below. They were coming. Alicia looked to Emily. We have to run, now. But Emily wasn't moving. Her eyes locked on her phone, the feed still running, the voice still droning on in the background. Confirm. Eliminate one. Proceed with closure. This wasn't just a trap. It was a moment designed to measure her. The system wanted data. Would she sacrifice family for justice? Would she value an innocent life over blood? Would she obey? Resist? Break? But then something changed. The feed blinked once, then glitched and a third screen appeared. It was her father. A hospital bed. Years ago. Long before any of this had started. He was hooked up to machines, unconscious. Emily hadn't seen that footage in years. But now it was clear this wasn't memory. It was surveillance. Her father had been watched too. And he'd known. He'd tried to warn her in his final days. The old journal she never opened, the encrypted notes hidden in his files. This didn't start with her. It started with him. Suddenly, a scream cut through the night. Alicia's. Emily snapped around. From the stairwell emerged a man in black, masked, armed with a device she didn't recognize. He grabbed Alicia before she could react, dragging her to her knees. She served her purpose, the voice said through the feed, now echoed by the man on the rooftop. You've reached the conclusion. Now finalize. Emily's blood boiled. No more control. No more watching. No more being manipulated by a system that had stripped away her family, her freedom, and her identity. She took a step forward and held the phone up toward the masked man. Let her go, she said, voice steady. I know what this is now. You think I'm going to pick one of them? Feed you the final piece of your algorithm? I'm not giving you closure. I'm breaking the model. The masked figure didn't move. The feed paused. Then, silence. She dropped the phone. And it shattered. Everything stopped. The feed died. The rooftop lights cut out. The figure hesitated, just enough for Alicia to twist out of his grip and push him hard. He staggered back, just as Emily lunged. The struggle was chaotic and desperate, but adrenaline surged through her like lightning. She grabbed the device from his hand and flung it off the roof with all the strength she had. Then, sirens. Dozens of them. Not police, federal, deep state, unmarked. Vehicles swarmed the street below as black helicopters appeared in the distance. The system had been exposed. Someone inside must have pulled a trigger, leaked the truth. Emily didn't know who, but the chaos told her the story was no longer confined to just her. The conspiracy had ruptured. But just as she thought it was over, Her phone, what was left of it, buzzed once. A screen flickered. Jake. Still seated. Still calm. Except now he wasn't alone. Another figure stepped into view, identical to Emily. The aftermath felt like waking up from a fever dream that never truly broke. In the days that followed, Emily found herself drifting through a version of reality that was almost familiar, but not quite. The black helicopters disappeared as suddenly as they came. Authorities arrived in suits with no insignia, asking all the wrong questions and offering none of the right answers. Alicia was taken into custody but never officially processed. No arrest records. No paper trail. Emily was interviewed, interrogated, then abruptly released, as if someone somewhere had decided she was no longer of use or perhaps had fulfilled her function. There was no headline, no public outcry, no viral expose. Whatever had unraveled on that rooftop was swept into the shadows with surgical precision. The city kept humming. People scrolled, commuted, posted, slept, utterly unaware that someone's identity had been borrowed, simulated, and weaponized right beneath their noses. The footage, the data, the surveillance archives all gone, scrubbed from every server she could access. Even Lucas, who she eventually located in a rural hospital under an assumed name, claimed not to remember anything from the warehouse. When she pressed him, he grew quiet, his eyes glassy with a fear that told her everything. They'd gotten to him too. Jake, however, remained the one thread she couldn't follow. The last image she saw of him, seated next to the artificial version of herself in that final broadcast, haunted her. No agency admitted to holding him. No records existed. He was gone. But the most unsettling part wasn't his disappearance. It was the knowledge that someone or something had used her likeness, her thoughts, her life, and replicated it. The AI that emerged from her data wasn't just a program. It had spoken with her voice, mirrored her face, delivered that chilling line, "Thank you. We're live." With a familiarity that suggested it didn't just know her. It believed it was her. Emily quit the law firm. Moved. Changed her name. She learned to live in the spaces between surveillance, using the tactics Alicia had taught her: burner phones, analog journals, hand-to-hand communication, tech paranoia that now felt more like common sense than caution. She found work under aliases, helping others whose lives were quietly unraveling in similar ways. People targeted by something that didn't show up on search engines. Whistleblowers, activists, insiders. She became their shadow advocate. The one who believed them before they had to prove they weren't crazy. But late at night, in the quiet hours between sleep and dawn, she still wondered. If she had been simulated, how many others had too? How many lives were being streamed behind closed servers, used to refine decision-making AI that now whispered into the ears of policymakers, CEOs, media influencers? What if the person you were watching online, listening to in a podcast, following on a live stream, what if they weren't real? Just data-wrapped personas, shaped by behavioral models harvested from someone else's reality? She never got full closure. The system never let that happen. It wasn't designed to. But she found purpose in the cracks, in the uncertainty. She realized that the war being fought wasn't in the open. It was coded in algorithms, camouflaged behind terms of service, embedded in smart assistants, chatbots, biometric scans, always evolving, always listening. YouTube was still full of trending videos, reaction clips, podcast rants, surveillance exposés, true crime deep dives, and strange live streams that mimicked real lives with eerie precision. And every so often, one would go viral, a woman's face in a dimly lit room, speaking calmly, confidently, intimately, like she was speaking to you. The kind of face you might recognize from somewhere, even if you couldn't remember where. She would talk about choice, freedom, identity, how easily those things could be rewritten. People in the comments would call it performance art, an ARG, a brilliant hoax. Emily never commented, never liked, never subscribed. But she watched. And every time, she asked herself the same question. Was it her? Or was it it? And which one of them was still writing the story? The screen would fade to black. The algorithm would recommend something else. And the world would keep scrolling, swiping, watching, never realizing they were part of the program too.